Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Crammy. Welcome to this session. And on the left-hand side, sessions, one today and one Thursday. Today is going to be focusing on the inventory module and using purchase orders from a non-accounting standpoint. And we're going to the 5 topics that I've got listed there, who can use it, required steps to use purchase orders, and so on. On Thursday, we're going to switch gears and talk about finished goods and finished goods inventory and how you go about using those. If you look at the on the GoToWebinar control screen down towards the bottom, you're going to see handouts, and there is a handout for this particular session. That the session is going to be recorded as well, so you'll be able to listen to that. I would encourage you to download that the handout. That's going to be basically my talking points for today, but it might be helpful to focus more on the visual side and knowing that the path that I'm following through is related to the to the handout document. This is a pretty lengthy topic, so it's really not going to be possible to go into a tremendous amount of detail. So if there's something that I don't hit that you're interested in, it may be better for you to reach out to the Serious Consulting department for that for more detail. I'm just going to quickly show you the handout so that you can see. It's over on the right-hand side. Well, it's right-hand side of my screen. And this is the handout document. It's fairly lengthy, and this is what we're going to be walking through. So I'm going to change screens again, and we're going to go to remote desktop, and you should be seeing the control screen. So let's get started. I'm going to pause periodically for questions, and if I see that there's a question that maybe is a little bit too detailed for what we have time for, I will interject and suggest reach out to the consulting department. Okay, so the first question is, well, who can use the inventory module? The inventory module is optional, and you may or may not have it. The easiest way to see if you do have it in your system is to go up to Help and then About Control. And if you look down the list of topics here, you're going to see the word modules. And if you come over to the right and do an expansion of that, these are that represent the modules that are active in your system or available in your system. And if you'll notice that the inventory is highlighted there, that means that the inventory module is included in my system, and that's how you could tell if you have it in yours. If you don't see the inventory module, but after our discussion today, if it looks like it might be something that you're interested in, then I would suggest that you reach out to the Serious Sales department, and their email is the word sales@Sirius.com, and they'll be able to answer your questions, and including giving you some some pricing information. Now, if the inventory module is present in that list, it has to be enabled before you can actually begin. So the way you would activate or enable the inventory is to go up to Production, and then you're going to see Production Setup. So I'm going to select it, and this first check mark right up here at the top. If that is not checked, then the inventory module won't be available and functional for you, and you would have to simply edit this list over here on the action toolbar to the right, edit it, and put a check mark on enable inventory tracking, and then save it. And now you're good to go, for actually using the inventory module. The basic concepts that we'll kind of explore, the basic concepts behind using the inventory module and purchase orders, is it allows you, the purchase orders will allow you to create a purchase order so that you can order materials, primarily materials. Technically, you can use the inventory module or the purchase orders to, for labor and stuff like that, but most likely you're going to limit it to the use of materials, ordering materials. So you're going to create a purchase order, and you're going to order some material from a vendor. Then the process that we'll walk through, you're going to receive that material, and you're going to tell the inventory module that you have received that the material. That's going to put it into the inventory list for that particular part. And then as time goes by and you create invoices and people order stuff, any material parts then that you are tracking inventory are going to look at the inventory level. And if it's low, it's going to give you a prompt to say, hey, you're low on this particular material, or you're out. And you're going to be able to set parameters that says what the level is that you want to maintain it before you get a prompt that you might be running low. Okay, so that's the basic concept. You're going to use a purchase order to order material from a vendor. You're going to receive that material into inventory, and then over time, as you create in things of that nature, it's going to remove or reserve those items out of inventory. Now, the required steps. What are the required steps in order to use the purchase orders and inventory? Well, we've already talked about enabling the inventory module itself, but you also
Paul,
have to.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Looks like the screen is frozen. Are you moving around? Okay. All right. I was afraid it might have been frozen. Okay.
No.
All right. We can see your mouse moving. Thank you.
Okay. You're just writing to see if I'm awake up here. Okay, but to use the purchase orders, you have to activate the use of the purchase orders. So to do that, you're going to go up to setup again, and then, excuse me, you're going to go to system setup. And then over here on the left-hand side, you're going to come down a little over halfway, and you're going to see purchase orders, bills, and receiving documents. Okay. Now here, just like in enabling the inventory module, you're going to have to pay attention to these two things right here that I've got already checked. Enable receiving documents and enable purchase orders. We're not talking about the payables and bills because that's part of the accounting module. So these are the two critical ones for enabling and activating the use of purchase orders. Once you've turned them on, just save, and now you're good to go. You'll notice down here at the bottom on the left-hand side in the first column, there are other items that are there. So if we look at purchase orders, you want to make sure, I'm going to edit that so you can see it a little bit better. You want to make sure that there are check marks on these first four, these second through fourth or fifth items, these four. The other items that are in this category, bills, next numbers, purchase order notes, etc. You can look at them. I don't know that I would suggest that you make any changes to them. The purchase order, I might comment on the purchase order numbering scheme. Numbering scheme. It has its own sequence of numbers. So you can see that I've already created some. So you got orders that have their order numbers, you have estimates that have their estimate numbers, and you have purchase orders that have their numbers. And if you have going out again to using recurring orders, they have their numbering sequence. Okay. Any comments or questions? We're ready to jump into the next piece if we're not.
I think we're good, Paul.
All right. So now the next thing, I got to take something to drink here just a second. Now we have to talk about setting up parts themselves to track inventory. And you can do that either at the individual part level or at a part category level, okay? We're first going to do that. We'll take a look at how to do that at the part level. And then after we walk through that, excuse me, then we'll take just a few seconds to do the same thing at the part category level. So again, we're going to go up to setup. This time we're going to come down to pricing setup, and then we're going to go to all pricing. Once you get there, you're going to want to select part setup on the first column. Then over in the second column, as I said earlier, you're probably going to focus more on using POs and tracking inventory at the material level. So I have expanded the material. And let's just take a quick look at one of these. So I'm going to come down to roll stock right here. And I'm going to come down to print vinyl. And I'm just going to pick this first one. Now you come over and you'll edit that again so that we can see. And you're going to do a couple of things in here. You're going to see there's normally going to be a check mark right here. All right. So you would remove that check mark. This is again where you're tracking inventory at the part level, not at the part category level. So you're going to remove the check mark. Then you're going to go to the accounting tab and make sure that you're tracking costs, which should already probably be set. And then you're going to want to make sure that you check the accrue costs and that you're going to track inventory. And on the track inventory, you have to choose an account. And you can see I chose the orders due account. So now what that has done is set up the use of the inventory and POs for this particular part. Okay. Now I'm going to choose the inventory tab right here. And there are some columns in here that are important. First, it's the cost per unit of this particular material. This says how many we have billed, how many have actually been received, how many units have been billed or received, how many are on hand, how many are reserved. This means that that number of units have been reserved for orders that are in process. This is what I have available. Notice that there's a negative sign there. That's because we don't have any that we've actually received. I've not actually made a purchase order that's been received to indicate that that's what we have available. So you can see I'm kind of behind in this area. So reserved, available, on order. There may be more on order that hasn't been received. What are we expecting? What's the reorder level? How many units? How many units that do you want that to be before you get a trigger to do a reorder? And what's the quantity that you're going to reorder? Again, you can change these on a case-by-case basis, but that's just an indication for this particular part. We want to reorder X number of quantity, or we want to reorder at a certain level. The yellow and the red levels are different levels of warning, so to speak, of if you're running particularly short, you'll get to one level, and then if it's really severe, you'll get to the next level. When you're done at this point, you can just simply save, and now that particular part has been set up to use the purchase orders and inventory. Okay, so now let's. I'm going to close this so we can kind of come back at it again. We're going to look at doing the similar series of steps, but at the part category level instead of the part level. So I started by going to setup, pricing setup, all pricing. Now I'm going to choose part setup. This time I'm going to expand materials again. This time I take a look at a flat stock material, and specifically let's take a look at this particular part. Notice here, instead of coming down to the part and doing our thing, I'm going to do it at the part category level. Okay, so if I edit this again, here I want to take off the check mark that says use the parent category, and now I want to go to the here again, verify that track costs is on, verify that the accrue cost is on, verify that the track inventory is on, along with the appropriate account. And when you've done that, save. And now, if there were 2 or 3 or 10 different acrylic materials in this particular category, they would all have been enabled, so to speak, to use purchase orders to orders, receive it, and you wouldn't have to do that on all of them individually. Again, there's one more real quick thing I want to mention before we move on to the next significant topic, the accounting module. The accounting module is optional, and what we're covering today is not directly related to the accounting module. There are a couple of spots where if the accounting module were in play, that there would be some different considerations to think about. But by and large, our discussion here is independent of whether or not you're using the accounting module. Any questions before we jump deeper and actually start to create a purchase order?
No questions, Paul.
All right. So now, how do you create a purchase order and request and then actually receive material? Well, to begin with, you have to create a vendor. And you're going to choose the new and then vendor, and you're going to proceed from there. Now, instead of starting to make a new one, I'm going to close this down and I'm going to open one that I have already created, and then I'll talk through the different topics that we need to cover. So I'm going to cancel this, go up and explore vendors. And this is one that I've already created. Okay. Now I'll edit that so we can see it a little bit better. Obviously, you have to give it a name. So I got really creative and use CyrSkills vendor. You're going to notice that it's going to probably start off active, and when you did new and vendor, the vendor check mark is going to be set. Now you may also be a prospect, again under the same conditions as if you'd created a new customer. Now, I think I've mentioned in prior webinars that you can have a customer that is both a customer of yours and a vendor that you're going to purchase from. So they can be either or both, a customer and a vendor. The pricing level over here on the left, or on the right, these three, the pricing level, the promotion, and the pricing plans are really not relevant, to our discussion. Just like with you're creating a new customer, if you want to check to see if that name already exists, you can do that. So now moving down into the company and contact tabs, these two here, the process is identical. So this part here to complete these is identical as it would be if you were creating a new customer. Same thing's true with the contacts. Same thing that you would talk about. Now we're coming out to the vendor tab. And this is where it gets interesting. You got some things up here at the top that we need to cover. If the vendor is going to be a 1099, you would want to put a check mark there. If you have established payment terms with that vendor, you would want to indicate that. And whether you have credit, a credit with that vendor. So these are just check or not check. The vendor may have a default shipping method, the way they ship to you. If so, you can enter who that carrier is. And if they have a tax ID number, you would enter that here. And if they have an account number that they have assigned to you, you might want to put that into here as well. Okay. Now, over here in the parts section, this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time. If you want to add, excuse me, if you want to add, you're going to choose, let's come in and do a blank one here, just a second. I can show you that a little bit easier by going from scratch. Go out to the vendor tab. Okay. I'm not going to save any of this, but I wanted to be able to show you the process of building this list. What you're building here is the materials that you're typically going to purchase from this vendor. So you begin that by going to add, and then again, focusing primarily on materials. Let's say that we're going to come down to print vinyl. So we'll go to roll stock, come down a little bit deeper, and let's go to print vinyl. And let's say we're going to purchase that material. So we're going to add that. Okay, that's in the list. Let's say that they're also going to add that cut vinyl. And let's look at a flat stock. And we'll come down to aluminum. Let's go to a coroplast. Oh, I don't have anything in coroplast. We'll go to here and we'll add this one. Okay, so this list represent the three parts that I'm typically going to purchase. Okay. These represent what's going to be referred to as a catalog. So when we actually go to create a purchase order, you're going to see them appear, and I'll point that out in a bit. So these represent the list of items that we're going to typically purchase from this vendor. Okay. Now the other fields over here are kind of optional. If if any one of these has a SKU number, you would put it in. This is the vendor's part name. You can change that if they identify it as a different name. There's a barcode involved. Then here you can enter the cost of this particular material, and its unit of measure is sheet. Okay, so it's picking that up out of the part that's in control. Okay, if you change that, if you change it here, make that 75, it does not change the cost that's in control. So this would be for the purchase order. For a purchase order, this would represent the cost that it's going to use. Okay, and then the stocking unit, you can set that as a default. So it's $60 and a penny per sheet is the stocking cost. Now notice down here at the bottom, you got view part and make a preferred vendor. So let's talk quickly at the view part. Before I do that, let me just come up, and we got the same kind of comments: the SKU if need be, barcode if need be, what the roll cost is, the cost per roll of this material. And I'm going to comment later, and don't let me forget. You typically are going to buy a roll material is typically a little bit different than sheets or things like that. You're typically going to buy that by the roll, X number of rolls at a particular cost, but within control, you're typically going to consume this roll material not by the roll, but rather by the linear feet. So we'll look how you handle that situation where you're going to purchase material under one unit of measure, but it's actually going to be consumed or used within control differently. Okay, and cut vinyl, here you're expressing it per roll, and you're likely going to be consuming it in control on a per square foot basis. So let's go back up to this roll material, and if we say view the part, now we can see that everything that you would normally have expected on this particular material. I'll come back to that in a minute.
Oh, we do have a question.
Okay, let's pause here for just a second.
The question is from Robert. Can you have multiple vendors for same part?
Yes. They may identify this differently. So you would have a vendor for vendor A, and you would purchase that part at their cost, and you may get it from a different vendor at a different cost. The part cost that's in control, you're going to have to decide which of the two, or if you're going to use an average in those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it.
All right. I'm going to come back to this in a bit. Now you can make a vendor, a preferred vendor. So this was the one then this vendor would be the one that would pop up first. And when you're all done with the setup, you would choose the save over here on the right. Let me Okay, now we're going to actually look at a purchase order and begin to create one. So if I were starting from scratch, I would come up to new, and then I'd come down to purchase orders, new purchase orders. And you'd put in the vendor that you're buying from, the description of what it is that you're buying. And then you're going to build some stuff out of here where you're going to choose which part or parts you're going to select for this particular purchase order. And then we'll be talking about these various columns as we come across. Okay. So going back up here before we get down into the material stuff, look at the top section of here. You got the vendor name, that's obvious. The description is pretty obvious. Now you can set over here on the far right, you can set what the status is that you want this purchase order to have when it gets saved. The most basic one is that it is requested. Okay, and I'll talk about the definition of those for you to think about in just a bit. But it could be approved or it could be ordered. So these are the three primary statuses that would be relevant when you're creating a new PO. And which one you choose really is more of a, it's more important to consider your procedure internally that makes sense. If you have a more formal PO process, then you would likely begin as requested. It's not ordered, but you've requested it. Then in the PO department, they may say, yes, it's approved. And then the next step after that, it would actually be ordered, in which case the order, the PO itself, would have been sent to the vendor. Okay, so which of these that you choose for the initial save really is going to be influenced by your particular procedure internally. Now, there's a couple of items here that I'm not going to focus on other than repeat what I've read and watched in some of the other videos on this particular topic. You can associate this with a default order and put the order number in there. I've been cautioned to be very careful in doing that. And I think the context is not that it's going to cause problems, but it may not function as you really intend. Same thing with the line. Both of those, they suggest using caution. And I guess the takeaway for that is that if you want to learn more about what it means to have a default order or a line item reference, reach out to the consulting staff for guidance. I've already over here on the left, I chose the blue diamond. And now we're ready to begin to select material or materials that we want to purchase. The first item that you see is I'm going to come back to this for just a second. I'm not seeing what I wanted to see here. I'm not seeing here. Just a second. I got to get my. What I wanted to see was where the catalog is. So let's. I'm going to do a review of purchase orders where I've already got one set. And I'm going to open this one. And now let's edit this. Okay, this is what I wanted to see. Notice that when you choose the vendor, that's where I was goofy. When you choose the vendor and your description here, the first item that pops up is called vendor parts. This, using the correct terminology, this represents the catalog of materials that you would typically order from this particular vendor. So you created that catalog when the vendor was initially set up and saved. And then as you begin to create purchase orders using that vendor, you may choose one or all or none of these for a particular PO. So if I want this, I've already got an acrylic one in there. So let's do a laminate. So what I did was double click the part over here on the left, and it showed up over here on the right. Okay. Now, as you're going on the acrylic, as you're going along, it says that it's a catalog item, what the part name and what the description is, what the expense is that it's being charged, allocated to. And this one had said that I wanted to order 2. And I have 2 that are remaining. They have not been received, is the message that's here. If on the laminate, if I wanted to order 3 rolls, I would have put the 3 in there. This is the cost per roll, $160 per unit. And out here in the order column, it says that these are parts that are being tracked in inventory. Okay. So you're seeing the units, how many you're ordering. And when you're done with that, you would simply save it. Okay. So I'm going to save it, added a laminate. Now, once we've done that, well, if I were to come back, let me just add one more thing here, just real quick. You're not limited to taking things from the catalog, okay? I could also have come down to materials, and I could have come into flat stock, and I could have come into foam core and double clicked it. Now, notice that I took these 2 items out, out of the catalog for that vendor, but then I went specifically and said, I want to order this part from this vendor for this purchase order. And I'm going to order 6 sheets, okay, with the appropriate cost, right? I could have done, there are other things in here. So if I look at these, you can actually create a brand new part. Let's just take each of these one at a time. The none indicates that there's no item. You're just leaving a blank space in there. If you choose new, that will take you out and you can create a new part from scratch from within the creation of this purchase order. And then when you're done, then it would be part of this PO. You can take it from a catalog item. You can take it from a particular part. You can allocate it to a specific expense. The expense that permits choosing an expense account for this item, notes you can add to your heart's content, other materials, other labor. These are the basic choices of what you can include in the purchase order. My gut tells me that you're going to focus mostly at the catalog level or at the particular part level. Let me just, in the quantity column, we've talked about that, entering the quantity that you're purchasing, for new purchase orders, the fields that are not used are the billed and the received and the quantity remaining for the actual creation of the PO. The units reflects the units for the particular part. Here's where it gets interesting. If I come out to the let me just go up so I can do it outside of the PO that we're doing. I want to look at a roll material and show you the what I was alluding to a bit ago. Here you got for the units and how those units are used. This is how it's used for inventory purposes, how you see it, and then this is how you can kind of combine the two. All right, so simply said, what this means is that for inventory purposes, my unit is each a unit of a roll material. And what that unit is, it's a roll. So I want for each roll, okay? For display purposes, it's length, the linear length, and that unit is in feet. Over here for the additional, it says that each of these is one, and it's a 150-foot long roll. The length is in feet, and it's 150 feet per roll. That's how you think of this. This is the mechanism that you would use for typically roll material or cut vinyl that may be in square feet. This is the mechanism then that you would use so that you can, within the context of a PO, you can think of how you're ordering that from the vendor. And then the display units and the additional units, that helps you bridge the gap on how that roll, so to speak, how you're going to consume it on estimates and orders. The unit cost, let me go back to the PO, the unit cost here, that'll pick this up out of the part in control, but you can change it. The total cost is for 2 rolls at $160 or at $60 a piece. This represents the total cost for this purchase from the vendor. And 3 rolls at $160 is $480. 6 rolls at $60 is $360. And then you see the total for the purchase order down here in the lower right. I think I've got, I'm just looking at my notes here just a second. Okay, some of the other things down here at the bottom. I'm scrolling out here. Okay, here we go. These are the columns. You can put in the SKU number if you need to. And this is the status of the material, of this particular item, that it's in the requested status. And you can change this to requested. Okay, so each of the items, you got the PO has its status, and the individual items have their status. That's the message that I'm trying to say. Okay, moving on. I'm going to have to pick up the tempo here. We're running short. I've already covered, so I'm going to, if we're done, I would simply save this and added items, and that's okay. Okay. Now, we're going to talk next about the life cycle and the purchase orders. And then the process flow. So if we look at the in Explore, I did Explore purchase orders right here. So now it's showing me the purchase, each of the purchase orders and what status that they're in. So let's take this one. The status started as requested. And again, depending on what your process may be, the next thing that would happen is that it may be that it was approved, if it's a fairly formal process. So it could be approved, or it could actually be ordered. And if we had a relatively informal procedure, they could go straight to received. Okay, so that's the normal cycle, is that you're going to go from requested, and the most sophisticated, the next step is going to be that it's approved. The third step is that you will have ordered it, and then the fourth step is that you would have received it. And when you get to the end and everything has been received, then it would go to a closed status. Now, where you have these involved at the line level, that's because you may not get the shipment of everything all at the same time. So if you change the status here, that applies just to this particular line item. So I said, now this item has changed. It's now been received. Notice over here to the left, I have a quantity of 2 that I ordered, and I told the system that they have been received. This one is still requested. I ordered 3, and there are 3 remaining. Let's say that we received those. I would change the status to received. And now the remaining is going to go to 0, and the received changed to 3. Okay? What's very, very important to know is that within the context of the inventory, within the purchase orders and inventory, without the accounting module being involved, you cannot handle partial receipt. So we ordered 6. I couldn't tell it that I received 3 of them. You would have to adjust the quantity that was ordered to 3, and then you could receive 3. So there's not a mechanism for partial receiving of goods, of materials. Once they've all been received, Now you can change this. Now you might want to, after all of it's been received, you may want to come up here and say, this guy is now closed. Okay. I've ordered everything. I've received the materials as it trickled in. And when I'm done, I've closed it off. Okay. I'm just trying to see if I can skip over some of this. I've mentioned that they can't do partial billing, requires the accounting module. The other thing that I have skipped over, let's clone this one. Actually, there's more on this that are in the handout, and you can follow through. I would really prefer to jump in a little bit down the pike here, just because of time. I never know when I'm putting these sessions together, the time aspect. We've gone through Explorer for changing the statuses. What I want to do now is to jump pretty much to the end. It's the part usage. I'm going to go to acrylic. Part setup, materials, flat stock, acrylic. This is telling me for acrylic, the cost of the unit, per the unit. I have billed a -1. I've played around with this, so don't hold me to the quantities that are here. I've received 6. I have 5 left. I don't have any reserve, meaning that I don't have an order that was created and saved. And as soon as you save that, it looks in your tracking inventory for this particular part. If so, it's going to mark that is reserved, meaning that it's pending being used. And then you got what's on available, and if there's any that are on order that have yet to be received. So when you look at the part, you're going to see a picture of what's on hand with that particular material. Now, if we were to have created another order that used acrylic, let's just do that real quick. I'm going to put we're going to use acrylic, and I'm just going to create a flat stock. I'm going to use pen. And these are going to be 4 by 4. And acrylic. And I'm just going to stop at that point. Okay, so I've ordered it, and now let's save it as an order. Okay, that's okay. I always forget to do this. I'm going to put in a PO number up here of 5/22/18, and I'm going to save that. Okay, pay attention to here. It says this order has the following parts with low inventory. Parts that are below the level are for this particular item. Okay, it's just a warning. Now, if we come back up, and look at that part again, look at acrylic. And go to the inventory section. I didn't do the part usage. Let's close this status, change the status. What I wanted to show was the transition of materials as you order it. It goes in, you see the build and the received levels and up and down. Then as an order is created, it's going to alter, it's going to go into reserved. And then when it's actually used, it's going to go reserved, and it's going to reduce the overall inventory levels. And you're going to do that partly by going to a dashboard and part usage cards. I'm going to pick myself, and then I'm going to put in the order number. This one that I just did. And I want to come down to the I'm going to make sure, I don't think I picked the wrong part. That was the issue. Okay, so I'm going to dashboards, part usage, off. Now it's showing the materials, and this is the part usage for the come on. I'm not seeing that part the way I wanted to see it. So go up to dashboards, part usage. There we go. Okay. This gives me the opportunity to tell the system would have calculated the number of units or sheets of that of that material that were estimated to be consumed, and it's the part usage where I can tell it how many I actually used. And when you do that, it's going to alter potentially the consumption, because what may have been reserved was 4 sheets or 3 sheets. But if you had to fix something or redo something, then it would adjust the inventory. It would take more out of the consumption, and therefore it would have done more with reducing the actual inventory level. So I apologize for that. We've skimmed over this pretty fast, but it's, so you put it in with POs, you receive it, you're creating orders. Those are reserving the materials that you may have been tracking inventory on. When you're done, you update the part usage to say how much I really used. And that applies not only to materials, but with labor for equipment. And then the things that are being tracked in inventory are going to actually adjust the inventory levels based on, initially it's going to be based on the estimated, and after the fact, if you're using part usage, it's going to be based on what you actually, that you were consuming. Now, to kind of bring this to closure for today, if you have a stockroom manager, you have a larger shop, and you're doing more, formalized procedures, you may have a stockroom. And this is a report if you have that kind of functionality, okay, in your procedure. Other reports, there's a whole raft of reports that are related to parts and inventory. All of these different categories. I would suggest that if you're using, you just browse through if you haven't already begun to use them. The ones that are more directly related to inventory are the history and the status. There's some that are related to vendor catalogs, received inventory only, and purchase order by purchased parts by vendor, POs. So there's a bunch of other reports that may have been that may be of interest. We're a little bit past the 11 o'clock hour. Let's pause and see if we have some questions. If not, I hope to see all of you on Thursday, where we will be talking about putting things into finished goods and then slowly pulling things out of finished goods. It has kind of an inventory context to it, but it's a different kind of inventory than what we've talked about today. So let me stop, see if we have some questions.
Nope.
All right, everybody. Helpful. Bye-bye.
Thank you.